Lippitt, owner of the Hill Street Group and host of Communication is an Art, the podcast. I'm a communication strategist, a public speaker, and a leadership trainer. Most weeks, I'll be joined by other communication specialists, but every few weeks, you'll hear from just me to equip you, the listener, with practical tools and strategies to navigate through your day with confidence. These podcasts are always non-scripted and conversational. So let's dive into this together. Hi, everyone. This is Pam Lippitt, bringing you another episode of Communication is Art. And I am so pleased and honored and excited to welcome, and I will welcome her in, Tina Sula. She's waving. If you're listening online, that was a wave she just gave, to today's podcast, because I just want to tell you that Tina and I we've crossed paths. We were connected on LinkedIn, but we live in the same city. And then she was a speaker for an event. I was a 3-part event on leveling up your business for business owners for women. And Tina was one of our speakers. And from there, we knew we had to connect. We had to have coffee, which is a really long coffee. So with that long introduction, hi, Tina.
Hi, Pam. I'm so honored to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, so, it's such an interesting thing. You wear a couple different hats that we're going to talk about. No, you're going to talk about them. So, Tina, I met Tina through the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit, where she does development work. But she is also, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see all my Go Blue stuff in the background. She is also a lecturer at U of M. And so, hi, tell us a little bit about how these two things came to be and really where you kind of fit both pieces together.
I would love to tell you. So I'll start by telling the story of something that happened to me, in the last 10 days. I went to a conference. I always try to volunteer, and this conference was at the U of M. It was the Women of Color Task Force. And I was the person sort of answering emails during the keynote speech, because I always try to go in, try to see like what's happening at the conference. And I always try to tie my content to what was discussed, in the plenary. Right. And the keynote speaker, starts talking about zone of genius. And I was like, oh my goodness, because for the past months, people are like, Tina, how are you? How are things? And I keep saying, I'm living my zone of genius. Like I am functioning in my zone of genius. And then hearing this woman, I sort of like had to close my laptop and I'm like, okay, something is happening here. I am getting confirmation and validation that I am really living in my zone of genius. So what is my zone of genius? So I am very lucky that I get to live my life's purpose at 2 great institutions. So I get to work at the Jewish Federation of Detroit. Our mission is to take care of the needs of the Jewish people and build a strong and vibrant Jewish future here in Detroit, in Israel, and around the world. And why it's so meaningful to me to work in the Jewish community is because I believe in the power of philanthropy to change the world. As a non-Jewish person, upon reflection, I learned philanthropy from my Jewish donors. So when I worked at the University of Michigan, when I worked at Henry Ford Health System, as Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. But it was my Jewish donors that really helped me understand what philanthropy really is. So for me to live my values and my purpose and to help people achieve their philanthropic goals and aspirations by connecting them to meaningful opportunities in the community is such a privilege. It's such a joy. And the second piece with working at the University of Michigan is I get to teach networking to undergrads. So I ask students this question, which is their final exam question. And it's a really hard question. And that question is, what do you want to accomplish with your life that's meaningful to you? And these are Michigan students. And Michigan students always have an answer for everything. And then
whether they have an answer or not, they have an answer for everything.
They always have an answer for everything. But then when I ask this question, you can feel the energy in the room, because now all of a sudden I throw the word meaning. Like, what do you want to accomplish with your life that is meaningful to you? And the energy in the room is like, ooh, what do I want to accomplish in my life that is meaningful to me? So I've been doing this work for 10 years. So I'm teaching, professional development strategies and the tools of networking. But I think my biggest contribution is helping them articulate their purpose and then activate their purpose. So this work for me is really parallel work, because I help donors answer the question, what do you want to accomplish with your philanthropy that's meaningful to you? And I help students, answer the same question in terms of their lives. And what we do with our time, our life, and what we do with our money, philanthropy, says a lot about what we value. So I feel like I'm living in my zone of genius because I get to show up as me. And I love taking people on this journey of intentionality and really getting clear on who they are, what their values are, and what they would like to achieve, with their lives that is meaningful to them.
That's so interesting. I think that there are people who come from privilege, but they have to make a decision that part of what they're doing is giving back. It's still an intentional decision. And then there are people who may not come from those kinds of means, but want to attain a good life for themselves, but with the caveat that they also want to do good for others. And so by putting this into students' heads early, whether it's a student who's paying full fare at Michigan or a student who's on scholarship, you're opening up potential to them. I have a friend, his name is Danny Siegel. He does a lot of work in the philanthropy tzedakah world. We've been friends for years and years. You may have heard of him or met him over the years. And when everybody was putting out bumper stickers that said, my student's an A student, my student's on the honor roll, he put out bumper stickers that said, my child's a mensch, which means like a good human being. Like, what good deed? You're putting that bumper sticker out because you've raised a child with good values.
Absolutely.
And so it's a whole, it all kind of comes together at some point, but without the values, I don't think the A student grade means much.
Oh, absolutely.
It means you can put your head in a book but you have to do more than that in this world. So
if you were to come visit me in my office, I have Post-it notes everywhere. And oftentimes it's saying, from conversations like this or from donor conversations. And one of them is, what does it mean to live a well-lived life? And it's having a positive impact on others, and I have a smiley face with it. I can just see it right now. So, philanthropy is not just money. Philanthropy is how we spend our time, how we spend our talent, and how do we give of that? It's testimony, it's our trust, it's our truth. So it's really how we show up in the world. My favorite saying, and it's a mentor of mine who gave it, like, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Right.
I mean, it's that. It's like giving, the biggest gift you can give the world is of yourself. So it's with some of the higher level donors that I work with, I can tell you that it's really hard to give away money. Where do you start? Like, who can I trust with my money? Where is there the greatest need? It's a lot, right? A lot goes into making a giving decision, but that's the joy. I mean, that's the joy.
And it should. If you're trusting an organization with your money and with your name associated, especially when your name is associated with a program at that level, you have to have your role is, as much as it's raising the dollars, it's raising the that know, like, and trust factor.
Oh, absolutely.
That people have to understand that they can count on what you're saying is going to be what happens. And that's how we communicate. I'm going to use that little thread and bring us back to the topic of the show, which is communication is an art. I call it an art because it's something you have to practice.
Mm-hmm.
I am an art. I am taking the reins of calling myself an artist. I am actually a pretty good artist, but I always say the first time I try something new, it's not going to look like the polished end piece. But in that world, I'm willing to rip out the knitting and do it over and make it perfect.
Yeah.
And I believe communication is the same thing. Sometimes you just have to rip up the piece of paper, start over, put the end at the beginning. So how do you look at this whole communication? I know your topic today is technically, though we'll see if we get to that, communicating on purpose. What does intentionality have to do with it? I thought that was a brilliant topic because to me, it's all about intention. It's all about practicing and preparing. So how do you figure those things out as you start your day?
Well, I feel that when we're communicating with others, if you really want to achieve your end goal, there has to be alignment. So in the networking class that I teach, and if I were to give a session, I always talk about strategic networking as the alignment between your purpose, what are you trying to achieve, and the opportunity that you seek. Right. So what is it that you want and who has that you seek? So if you don't know what you want, how can somebody help you?
Absolutely.
Right? Because people really do want to help you.
Yeah.
But if they don't know what you want, then they can't.
Because it's too open-ended. It just when it's just, I just want to say hello. Okay, I can help you with that, but figure out what you want. That makes total sense to me.
Right. So I think that alignment is so, important. So, every time I do something, so let's say I'm going to a networking event, I'm one of those people that I'm not going to go to a networking event unless I can actually articulate. So to go from implicit to explicit, like what am I trying to accomplish? Like what is my end result? You know what I mean? Yeah. Why am I there? Are the people that I want that have the opportunities that I seek, are they there? So really it's that alignment between clarity of purpose, clarity of opportunity. And as Brene Brown says, clear is kind. Yes. But it's really hard to get clear. I had a guest speaker in my class last night, and we met earlier so I can buy him a cup of coffee. He came all the way from Atlanta. Wow. And we were walking around, and he mentioned, or he and I were talking about Mark Twain. I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have more time to write you a short letter. Right? And it makes me think so much of my time at the Ford School of Public Policy. I have a master's in public policy. So in undergrad is like, can you write a 30-page paper? That was sort of like, I wrote a 30-page paper. And then you go to the Ford School or any public policy school, and it's like, can you write all of this in one page, make a recommendation, and justify that recommendation? And I think to go back to the Mark Twain piece, it takes a lot of work. Probably a lot more work to write a shorter document. So
I just talked about this yesterday. I was on someone's podcast yesterday, and I just talked about this, that when I work with startups, because sometimes I work with, startups and on their wording and stuff, every single form that has to get filled out has a different criteria. So it could be 500 characters or 50 words or 75 words, but we don't count the spaces.
Right.
And so one of my tasks is taking all these words they've given and condensing it down. And I am excellent at taking out those extra words.
Right.
It's a skill. It's a practice skill. It is not something for the faint of heart. So,
I'll give you an example. So in my work in philanthropy, donor stewardship is of utmost importance. So I have this process. A friend of mine at Henry Ford introduced me to a mentor of hers. He was a former dean of a business school. His name is Dr. Nevi. And he taught me that structure drives behavior. Behavior becomes habit. Habit is the foundation of culture, and culture is your brand, right? So let's say I have a brand of being an excellent networker. So there are some people that if they did not know me at all, they would say, of course you're a great networker because you can talk to a wall. And by the way, I've gotten this feedback, and that's why I am sharing it. But that's not why I'm a good networker. I'm a good networker because I have created structure.
Right.
So like one bit of that structure is that I start my workday by writing a gratitude note. So every single day I have my personalized stationery and I write a gratitude note to someone. It could have been someone that I met the day before. It could have been like in any of our communications, I saw that one of our donors, is getting some award or is being acknowledged. And, I will write a note and I will send it. But when you think about how many days there are in a given year, just, number of weeks times 5 days. Okay, we'll take some of the vacation days, even though I write notes when I'm on vacation, I tend to do postcards. That's a lot of connection. That's a lot of engagement. That's a lot of sharing love with people. Because I can tell you that most of the stuff that I get in the mail is bills or junk. So to get something, from a human who took the time is actually something beautiful, or at least that's the feedback that I get.
No, it absolutely is.
So there is a structure of that's what I do. And by the way, I end my day with a phone call to somebody. You know what I mean? I put my ear pods on and then I might call you and you might say, oh my God, is everything okay? And I'm like, no, I'm calling you, Pam, because I was thinking of you and I just wanted to say hi. So there's little things we can do that can add significant value in terms of being the one people remember, which is something I share with my students. Like, how can you become the one they remember? And then when I think about, let's say, the art, we'll call it the art of the thank you card, it's this alignment thing once again, because a thank you card isn't thank you so much for, giving to the Jewish Federation, of Detroit. You make the world a better place. It's okay. It's an okay card. But once you know someone and you know what motivates them and why they do what they do, the ability to connect their purpose with the purpose of the organization, that makes someone feel seen, heard, understood, and valued. Right. And that's where I think the magic happens in terms of, connecting, communicating, and then ultimately succeeding or influencing people to achieve a shared goal or purpose.
So did you say that because you read it across the top that that's my byline, or did you just say that?
I read it. Oh, byline.
That's fine.
Because I'm a very intentional person, Pam.
Exactly. So, it's funny when when I'm on like a Zoom or on a different thing, when there's a group of people, always in the chat, when I ask people, when I say to people, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, I always say, and add a note that we were on this call together, because to me, that's like the gatekeeper. If there's a note, I'll pay attention. If there's not a note, it's just going to sit there till I have time. And that doesn't happen a lot. So just letting people know that, someone can say, I'll get a note saying, I really like that comment on, or I'll send someone a note, I'm connecting, but when you talked about this and this, it really resonated.
Right.
And it's just that next extra step that moves it forward.
I'm gonna so as part of my networking class at Michigan, every year I do a business etiquette dinner. So Keith Soster comes from Michigan Dining and he facilitates the discussion. I have, a donor. So this past year, it was the parent of a former student who funded the dinner, and we have the dinner. And the feedback I get from students is, I didn't know how much I needed this, right? Because it's sort of like, oh, it's a business etiquette dinner. What is Tina doing now? And the feedback is super positive. So in one of the conversations where we're actually talking about the importance of following up with a thank you note, Keith says, there is no traffic in the extra mile, right? So when you go,
what a great comment,
right? No traffic in the extra mile. That really stayed with me, right? Because when you do something that most people don't do, once again, you become the person people remember. And like I said, I can tell you within the last, the last 30 days, who in my life did something that was, extra mile where I can actually remember it. So a friend of mine left a Hershey's bar, right here on top of my laptop. And it was the Hershey's that said, Hershey's with a she, and
right.
is, and then all of these adjectives.
Oh, I never saw that.
Neither did I. And then I saw it, and I know exactly who it was, because these are the inside jokes that we play. And it was Robbie Turman from the archives.
Yes.
And it's our thing, right?
Right.
And for me to come to my office and see that, what a beautiful day to start the day. She didn't have to do that.
No.
Right? She didn't have to. But because she went the extra mile, here I am, I don't know, a month later, telling you this story.
Right. Well, and I'm thinking that Robbie would be a great person to have on a future podcast, because she communicates through the things we've really left behind and through our history.
Oh, so, she's amazing.
She's amazing. I do know.
Really is.
So, that's really interesting. It's interesting, right? How our lives weave together, and in the Detroit community, we seem to all know each other. People are jealous of that. I take it as a piece of pride. Mm-hmm. I didn't come from a family that was involved. They were involved in other things, but I've made my own name. And so that's how I've had to communicate that, no, I am, right. I am, this is me. And I like me. And I feel that the main thing that is the first thing that is a communication tool,
right,
is your name and how you have embodied your name. Mm-hmm. Because people will remember, it's like, it's what I say about weddings. If you go to a wedding and the food is really good, you never talk about it. But boy, if you go and it's bad, it's the only thing you talk about. And so I want people, when they hear my name, to smile or to maybe laugh a little. We say there's humor and everything. And that's what I want. That's my goal in life. And when things aren't going good, or someone, I know I take it personally when people don't like me. People say, don't take it personally. I think that's just so ridiculous of a statement, because how can you not? But that's a whole different topic. But I think it's the name you create for yourself.
I have this framework that I teach, and I call it the core. It's layers of identity. And you got to, learn a little bit more about it. It's the Level Up program. Right. When I talk about personal brand, I use Jeff Bezos's definition. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And to be a little dramatic, because it's all, people need a little bit of trauma, right? Like I said, in order to remember a situation, kind of like the food was bad and people be like, remember that wedding that had the bad food. I always say to my students, my personal brand is not my LinkedIn profile, or is not my presence online. My brand is what you say about me when you leave this class. What do you say to your, do you call your mom, or do you call your dad, or what do you say to the roommate? That's my personal brand. And, like the human body, or the human brain, I should say, we like shortcuts, right? So sometimes that's why you say your reputation precedes you. Yeah. Because that's the shortcuts, we use, right? So if the people we know and love trust us, they'll say good things. And if we trust them, we'll buy that message. I also start every session by saying, before you can trust the message, you have to trust the messenger.
Absolutely.
So I totally agree with you.
I'm just going to take a deep sigh right now over that comment. In the world, we'll just move on. And this part, by the way, may be in the part that if you're watching on YouTube is the uncut version. If you're listening, this little section may be cut out, but I will decide. Probably not, but I'll decide. I think that's so true wherever you go. It really is the beginning, middle, and end of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I just had an experience. A doctor of mine retired, and I went to the new doctor, whatever, and they told me all these things and said, "Well," I said, "Well, I didn't hear that before," and they said, "Well, the doctor was kind of checking out as they left," and the doctor is a personal friend of mine, and I'm not going back to this new doctor because it was the second person who said it to me. When the doctor came in, I said, I just don't understand that you're saying that this was even said. And she said, well, it is kind of what happened. And I said, okay, but if that woman was saying it about the first doctor who left, when you leave the room, what's she going to say about you?
Mm-hmm.
And she went, oh,
right.
It never occurred to her that someone who speaks poorly about one person when they're not in the room probably speaks poorly about many people when they're not in the room. And so that piece of communication of really putting your all into helping someone and doing something and paying it forward if it's been done for you is really the key, the underlying key to being intentional when you're talking with someone and when you're working with someone. I think this is such an interesting thread that in this podcast, I'll say it again, communication is an art, we have not really touched on, but I think it's fundamental.
Yeah.
And it's where we start.
Yeah.
It's and I like how you made that akin to how you start your day.
Oh, totally. It's so once upon a time ago, I had a coaching client. So a friend of mine connected me to somebody, and then they just needed like some philanthropic advice. And I said, hey, if I can meet you after 5:00, I would love to help you. And I remember in one of the first conversations, I said, your success in your organization moves at the speed of trust, right? And I don't know, like 2 years later, I mean, you become friends with people.
Right.
He then said to me, Tina, I thought you were cuckoo. Like, what are you talking about? Like, the world functions or moves at the speed of trust. Like, what is that? And then he said, as I've been reflecting, on, how does the world really work? It really is all about trust. Right. So for example, an equation that I often write is visibility times expertise equals opportunities. Right. Because I teach networking, and networking is about accessing opportunity. We do it through relationship building. So if you don't engage with people, the visibility, you could be the smartest person in the room. 0 times 100% expertise is still going to be 0.
Correct.
And then I realized that you can be very visible, but if people don't trust you, you know what I mean? You could, they'll know you, but they're not going to want to do business with you, right? Because people give opportunities to those they know, like, and trust.
So is it really bad that I immediately thought of a name when you said that you don't trust?
Oh yeah, no, that's not bad. That's good. Well, shortcuts. So really, the equation is trust times expertise equals opportunities. And for me, I've always said there is no leadership without trust, right? Because for somebody to follow you, like if you have a vision for change and if you want somebody to follow you, because you can't be a leader if there is no first follower. Right. If they don't trust you to follow you, you're not a leader, right? So the world really runs on trust. And I don't know how many years ago this was when I got this feedback, Tina, you're not so cuckoo after all. But really, it is all about trust. It's really all about people knowing that you have the best intentions, right? Because, you know what I mean? I speak another language, and sometimes things don't translate well, right? Or I could have I could be dealing with an issue and I might not be 100% present.
Mm-hmm.
I'm human. I
I
make
was to say that makes you human.
right.
That
But
does.
if people trust me and know that what I, when I come to the table, I come with good intentions, then even if I mess it up, we can have a discussion and say, Tina, that did not go so well. But if people don't trust me, then even if I do show up with positivity, they're going to question me.
Right. Right.
So,
and if they trust you and it's a one-off anomaly, that it's just not, today didn't go well, right?
I can
you look at the whole of a person, you look at the whole of the communication, and you say, okay, maybe they were having a bad day.
right. I can, speaking of, intentionality, I'm building a family philanthropy program at Federation, where I help multi-generational families engage their next generation in philanthropy and in community. So like we talked about earlier, the best way to engage someone is you have to understand their intentions, right? Because to be intentional means to do something on purpose. To do something on purpose, you kind of need to know the purpose, right? And sometimes, as an advisor to families, so there is a philanthropic advisor, there is an estate planner, an attorney, usually there are the tax people, you know what I mean? There's the wealth advisors. There's so many advisors to a family.
Right.
And then, you're having a conversation and you might have to say something that is what the person needs to hear, not what they want to hear. So for me, in the past year and a half, I have two questions that I ask myself. The first question is, whatever I'm doing am I doing it and am I showing up with love and care? Right? And if the answer is yes, then I move on to the next question. The next question is a really tough one. The next question is, do I have everything to lose by making this statement? Right? Because when I am about to make a statement, which can be very detrimental to me personally, that means I must really love that person and that family so much that I'm willing to risk,
right,
I'll call it my well-being. And it's really tough sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because to give somebody news that they might not like, and especially if they, if there's like a really important person, it's a lot, right?
Well,
and
because no one will tell that person the truth.
Correct.
Because they're not willing to be honest at the risk of.
Correct. Correct. So I've had some of these moments, right? But I've had to, meet them. I've had to build the relationship and earn that trust. And then I have to make that assessment of, do I want to say it? And is this the right time?
Yes.
And sometimes it's a really big burden. And I think this is the importance of, everyone understanding their own individual purpose in life. You know what I mean? I spend a lot of time, I teach this stuff. So of course I should be able to do this, work for myself, this self-leadership work. And my life's purpose is to inspire people to live their best lives. And I try to do that every single day. That's sort of the zone of genius thing that I mentioned.
Right, where we started.
So I have shared news where I was scared. You know what I mean? You could scared.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you deliver the message and I've pinched myself. I've done it all. I've sat on my hands. And so I've just waited for the response. And sometimes the response is like, whoa, what just happened?
Right. No one says that to me.
In most cases, it has always been a thank you, Tina, for letting me know, because most people will not. Right. And by the way, I've been wrong, but it has furthered that trust. Right.
If they, part of communication is things coming from your best place.
Right.
So if even if maybe the bits and pieces behind it aren't perfect or something along the line flips, people know your intention.
Right.
And that is how you communicate who you are, is your intention and what you're doing. So I think that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
So
I really love this, things coming from the best place. I think in my teaching work, and especially in my philanthropy work, so I have moments of what does my mind say, and what does my gut and my heart say, and I mean, philanthropy, like what does philanthropy mean? It's like for the love of mankind. It's like, it's feelings and it's mushy and it's like, how do you describe that? And you know what I mean? It's this very deep thing, and I'm also married to, someone who, shows up in the world with the following phrase, according to my calculations. Right? And I show up with, according to my intuition.
Right.
And with his calculations, my husband can give me the Excel. You know what I mean? Here's the calculation, bottom line, there you go. I can't articulate intuition. You know what I mean? I can feel it. I can feel the energy, right? Like I know when I'm in a psychologically safe space and I know when I'm not, right? And this is sort of the whole point of developing emotional intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But I think then for me, where intentionality really makes a difference is finding people who believe what I believe. Like if I show up with good intentions, people will see that. I was hanging out with a rabbi recently. Like it's awesome. You know what I mean? Okay. It's sort of, if I won the lottery, I would still work, but I'd probably like become a sort of 20 hours a week. I'd become a scholar. You know what I mean? I'd go to all the J-Learn classes.
So you know what I mean? I have to just interrupt you for 1 second and say, with that statement, when you were graduating college, could you imagine that was the statement you were going to make today?
Which statement?
I was hanging out with this rabbi and it was great.
Oh my gosh. It's funny how, everything plays out. One of the key observations that I've made, like if somebody were to ask me to give a TED Talk, sort of in the Jewish space, my TED Talk title would be, A Jewish Education is an Education in Leadership. Absolutely. Because, coming from the non-Jewish world to the Jewish world, I could easily connect the dots, right? It's intuition. I can't explain it. I can't articulate it. I just felt it because all the books behind me, most of them are leadership books.
Right.
And when I have conversations with rabbis for, 2.5 hours and it feels like it's like 20 minutes, it's really leadership themes, right? It really is like,
if you look at both testaments, the Old and the New Testament, mm-hmm. they both are leadership development tools.
I didn't know that.
Well, that's me. That's my opinion. It's not from a rabbi. It's from Rabbi Pam. But when you think about it, how did Moses, we're coming on to Passover, how did Moses become the leader even though he couldn't speak well? Aaron his brother was the speaker. So what qualities of leadership, I've studied that every year, I think, in some class or another. Yeah. What leadership qualities did, Moses had? What was it about Abraham that God chose Abraham to lead a people? Mm-hmm. What qualities did he have? His tent was always open, right? That's what we talk about with Abraham. The 4 sides of his tent were open because he was inviting people in, and that's what a leader does. They invite people into their space.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you what the rabbi said.
Yes.
What the rabbi said, which I loved, and it's, this whole, I lead from the heart. He said, what comes from the heart goes to the heart. And I thought that was so beautiful. I thought it was so beautiful that I went to our marketing people and I'm like, will you make me new thank you cards with that saying in Hebrew, and then I'll put the explanation in the back. Like
Right.
what comes from the heart goes to the heart. Right? Because when like purpose, like I said, motivation and what energizes us, people know when it's coming from deep down. People know when it's coming from your inner core, right? We all have this built-in lie detection equipment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I know when somebody's off, and I know when somebody's like, whoa, that person is awesome. Like, and I have physical cues, right? When I'm aligned with someone, I get goosebumps, kind of like, wow.
Right. Or on the other hand, I find it's very important to, whether it's actually happening or you feel it's happening and you feel the hair on the back of your neck go up, I have learned to listen to that feeling as well.
Yeah.
Move away.
It's nonverbal communication.
Yes.
It is very important information. I created with an amazing group of people at the Center for Academic Innovation at the University of Michigan. We created this online course based on my residential course. And it's really like shocking to me that there's almost 6,000 learners that have engaged with the class.
Wow.
And I get these messages on LinkedIn or like, oh my gosh, like the way you describe this, I got to have a conversation with my daughter. So I feel it's so meaningful to me. Kind of like I have those moments once in a while where, wow, like I'm making a difference.
Is that your course on Coursera?
Yes. So we chose to name the course How to Network Leading Yourself to Lead Others. And by the way, I reflect on, wow, I was so wise back then. Like what a title. But I'm telling you now, it was all intuition.
Right.
You know what I mean? I couldn't articulate it to you like I can articulate it, now that it's been, 3 or 4 years, like 3.5 years or 2.5 years. I don't know, 3.5 years. Because to really influence people, you have to first and foremost influence yourself. Like, who are you really? What do you care about? What makes you get goosebumps, right? Because none of us are born with, hi, I'm Tina Sula, and my core values are joy and authenticity. You know what I mean? Like you have to get tested. I mean, as I tell my students, and before that I was telling myself, values aren't real until they are tested, right? So when I say my core value is joy, I can guarantee you that I'm in a crappy situation sometimes and I want to be crappy. But then I say to myself, is that who I really am?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for example, like somebody might do something to me and I'm going to be like, well, if you're going to do that to me, I'm going to do this to you. Right? Because I'm human. And then I have to pause and then I'm like, is that who I really am? So if somebody's going to be negative to me, I'm going to represent myself because my response says nothing about them and says everything about me. So I think the self-leadership and knowing yourself and leading yourself, I think that's probably the most important work. And I think at the end of the day, it's our life's work, this journey of self-discovery. And I'm sure I can give you lots of quotes from very famous people. Yeah. It's like, know thyself.
Right. Well, I was going to say there's two parts of that. Is that who I am? But it's also, is that who I want to be? Do I want to be the person who's yelling at the poor flight attendant at the desk, the person at the desk because a plane is late? Is that who I want to be? No, it's not who I want to be. I want to be the person who understands that everybody else is yelling at her. So I am going to be extra kind.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one way I try to do that, to be honest, is normally everyone calls customer service to share their displeasure. I try to be the person that calls to say thank you. You know what I mean? And it takes extra effort.
Right.
And then I honestly, like I do it, I'm like, because that's how I want to be treated. Because when I get a positive experience, I get very emotional. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
sort of like a callback.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? From I didn't mean to call someone. This person calls back like concerned. You know what I mean? And it's a very important person. And then I sort of say, wow, I have value. People value me. Right?
And I say in the woo-woo world that when someone, dials you by mistake and hangs up, I always call back because I always say, deep down somewhere you were thinking about me. And so I wanted to connect and thank you because there's probably a conversation we could have now.
I think you're right. And it's okay, so I'll tell you in my like woo-woo world, the older I become, the more I think about energy. I'm part of this group of people. This group is called the Purposeful Planning Institute. So they are advisors to families and business, wealthy families, legacy families. And being a part of that community has been so enriching for me so that I can best serve the donors and the members of the community that I work with and just better serve the community. Well, somebody reached out to me because his client has a son here in Michigan. And then so he just went in the community and then reached out. It happens to be that I knew the son, but then we just developed this friendship. And he recommended 2 books, one on a synchronicity and the other one on serendipity. Oh. And if you would have asked me, speaking of the question earlier, would you have believed it when you graduated college? If you would have asked me like 5 or 10 years ago that I would be reading books on serendipity and synchronicity and calling them leadership books, I would have looked at you kind of like, what is wrong with you?
Right. You never know where that little through line is going to connect in life. You just don't know.
And with the synchronicity piece, it's really that, like the importance of energy and connection and just a whole new way of being. So now I'm all about energy.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I think because of this understanding on energy, like I connect with people in a completely different way, right? Like I can't explain it.
I will say, so I never said this before. So if you're listening, Tina, your real name is Klemintina. So if you're looking her up, it's Klemintina Sula. She's a friend of mine on LinkedIn. So if you look for me, Pamela Lippett, you can find Tina there as well through me. You can connect with both of us. I cannot believe how long we've been talking, but I can because this is what happened the first time we went for coffee, that we never left. I think they're still pouring extra cups there. If it hadn't have been so freezing cold in that room, we might still be there weeks later. But I think this was such an interesting conversation. And as my listeners know, I do not come to my podcast with a script because I want to listen and I think communication is a journey. And I want to go on the journey with you wherever it takes us. And so today, folks, it took us wonderful places we didn't necessarily think we were going to go. But boy, I hope you enjoyed the ride we took you on. And Tina, I just have to thank you. And I can't wait to see you again in person, which hopefully will be relatively soon. And that's what I have to say. I think this was fabulous. Do you have any final words of advice or thought or wrap up for folks?
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I also cannot believe how quickly the time went by. I'm grateful that I get to have these kinds of conversations on a regular basis, as I connect with people in the community and help them find ways to make a difference in the community. I think the final thing that I will say, I made mugs, after the online class was created. And the message on those mugs was, intentional CEO of my life. Right. So right. I think it's so important for all of us to spend some time thinking about who we are, thinking about, what drives us, what motivates us, and really being intentional to that in terms of the opportunities we pursue. Because when you have a clear purpose, the opportunities that come your way align with that purpose. Otherwise, you're going to be overwhelmed. So
Right.
some of my favorite people in the world are those that have a clear purpose, pursue their purpose, and then connect with others, to increase impact so that you can make 1 + 1 equal more than 3.
That's
Because
right.
together,
Synergy.
in collaboration, through communication, we can make that possible.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Join us again next time. There'll be some notes underneath how to reach us both. And this was fabulous. So thank you again.
Thanks, Pam.
Hi, this is Pam Lippett from the Hill Street Group. Thank you for listening to Communication is an Art. Make sure you subscribe and continue to listen. We really appreciate it. Share with your friends all those different lovely things. And we will be back soon. Have a great day.